because that's how Malcolm started. Both Malcolm's parents were members of this Garveyite movement, this transnational movement for black liberation and black freedom. When we start with the Garveyite movement, and we put that in context, we have to identify that what we are looking at is not just the U.S. as a nation state, but we're looking at the entire Americas, the creation of the Americas as a consequence of the European invasion in 1492. And we have to start there because Malcolm's father ended up in Georgia as a consequence of the transatlantic slave trade. Malcolm's mother ended up in Grenada as a consequence of that same slave trade. So we have to look at the entire Americas and its creation. Now, Malcolm's mother didn't stay in Grenada because of the reality of colonialism and the interconnectedness of all of these states created in the Americas. Malcolm's mother ended up in the U.S. She ended up in Canada, another settler colonial state. Malcolm's father, who grew up in Georgia, ended up migrating to Canada, where he met Malcolm's mother, Louise. And they both immersed themselves in the Garveyite movement. And they did that, my friends, because those kinds of experiences create the kind of international perspective that informed Garveyism. There was a normal part of the black radical tradition that was developing in the late teens and 1920s. This internationalist movement, this international perspective, is what was at the center of the black radical tradition. In the 1920s, when we had the evolution of Garveyism based in New York, we had other kinds of formations. The African Blood Brotherhood. We had the so-called Harlem Renaissance. We had the radicalization of black folks who ended up joining the CP, the Communist Party of the USA. We had the National Negro Congress. We had the creation of the NAACP. We had a whole host of formations, including the Nation of Islam, that animated black radical thought and resistance in this country in the 1920s, in the 1930s, and into the 1940s. Now, this was the political environment that Malcolm grew up in, but of course we know that Malcolm didn't just step into the shoes of his mother and his father and become the kind of political radicals that we know of him today. Malcolm, like many of us, also grew up in conditions that were contradictory. That not only did he have parents who were politicized, he still grew up in conditions that were contradictory in the sense that it was very difficult, very, very easy, that is, for Malcolm to find himself engaged in activities, trying to make a living, trying to hustle, that put him on the other side of the law. And in fact, had him engaging in anti-social and indeed anti-black behavior. And in some ways, that's part of the attraction of Malcolm for many of us. In the sense that we understand those kinds of conditions and we understand the pull of that kind of lifestyle. We understand that because many of us get caught up in it ourselves. But what's inspirational about our dear brother Malcolm X, like so many other people, is that Malcolm found his way out of that. That Malcolm understood at some point the consequence of that foundation he had from his parents and the influence of his family, particularly his sisters and his brother. He found his way back to a place where he could with his humanity, his dignity as an African person, and again, his contribution and service